We need to have a talk, you and I, and it's about Metroid. Have you heard about this thing? I don't know if it started as like a dance craze on TikTok or if it was something you put in your nose, but it always seems to come up in conversation, and it seems like it's always going around and really changing people's lives when they do it. I don't know if it's ever happened to you. Maybe you could tell me in the comments if you know any of the games, maybe what they mean to you, memories, sweet, important moments from your life that Metroid helped you through. I don't know. If something like that happened, it would help my investigation. So Metroid is a name I haven't heard in a couple years, but when I did think about it again, a whole lot of stuff came flooding back, and lately I've been looking at it a little bit differently than I used to, kind of seeing it a bit more clearly, having gotten more perspective, and I'm really taken by just how simple it is, among other things. There's a sort of simplicity that I've been feeling coming back to Super Metroid, dabbling in Metroid Prime a little bit, trying to get some replays going again in Metroid Dread, and it's hitting over and over how, on one hand, it's nothing like a Nintendo game, but on the other, it really kind of benefits from that simplicity of scope and polish and, I don't know, relative lack of emotional complexity compared to certain other comparable things. When I got into Metroid in 2021, it was as a super duper outsider. My only exposure and connection to sci-fi was like Star Wars, and I wasn't watching Star Wars for the aliens or the spaceships, it was just kind of the Star Wars-y holicity of it all, the way everything comes together, I suppose. But, you know, in the same way that you've been watching me on this channel slowly expand my appreciation of dark fantasy for things like Castlevania, I've been like, you know, how do I poke sci-fi? How do I poke this whole thing? And randomly, I had a chance to just sit down and watch Alien Romulus, the only Alien movie I've watched anything of on the plane, and do nothing but give it my attention. And I came away with a good couple thoughts, even though I didn't finish it, and I don't even know what that means. I don't know if it was going to get better or worse. I just kind of stopped watching. I was like, I've had enough. On one hand, it was super duper obvious how Alien and Metroid connected. Like, I actually walked away thinking it's kind of crazy how much Metroid and Vania, both halves, were influenced by movies and cinema in the 80s. Like, I never think of this genre as like an 80s movies thing, but it kind of is, which is a whole other topic. But I was picking up on so many different things. There were so many themes they were trying to weave in there. I super noped out on one of them, and I definitely, I don't know, I began to connect with it, even though I don't really do horror. I just don't really enjoy the feeling of being like unseated and uncomfortable and afraid and that kind of thing. However, I really, really do like being uncomfortably in the pocket in a kind of stressful scenario. And there was exactly one moment. There was one moment in the movie that I watched where I was like, well, this couldn't be anything but Metroid. And it was a character who was on her own in a very scary situation with the xenomorph, trying to pick herself up and deal with the situation. Like, things were dire. Things were really dire, but they gave these nice shots of her walking down these hallways, and there was like steam billowing and, you know, lights flashing, and it was so Metroid. Not just visually, but the emotion it was conjuring. I'm like, that is the Metroid feeling. And she got like wrapped up in, I don't know, tentacle, whatever, you know, that kind of shit. Like, she didn't make it, but that moment where she was trying and she was fighting and everything, I'm like, that's Metroid. That's where Metroid begins and ends in my mind, as far as I can tell as a somewhat new fan. That feeling was so different to the rest of what was going on in the movie. I mean, maybe there would be more of that if I got to the climax, but simply watching that, I was like, bam, that's extremely recognizable. It was so shocking, to be honest, because, you know, Metroid, I can see where the alien character inspiration came from, and then I've, you know, by extension, looked back to a little bit of just poking the concept of H.R. Giger art, And, you know, there's like, Metroid deals with a little bit of this idea of like reproduction. Like, reproduction is kind of frequently a theme in Metroid. Other M did like the maternity thing, but putting that aside, like, you know, horizontal gene transfer, that's pretty much the name of the game in Metroid 5, and yet they don't do any of the Giger, like, phallic orifice stuff at all, because it's a kid's game. Like, it's a kid's game. Like, there's nothing. There's no squirting out of orifice-shaped birth pods. There's no violating tendrils going down throats and key imagery of art to symbolize reproduction. That doesn't happen, because this is for babies. Very strong babies, but, like, it's just so interesting how, of all the things that got thrown in my face watching Alien Romulus, there was one explicit moment that was Metroid. And it was cool enough that it's like, yeah, no, I could see how that could be its own series. I can see how that could be its own series. That girl picking herself up, totally on her own, totally outgunned, walking and enduring. The visuals that went along with it, it was just such a complete package, even though it was just one part of a larger movie. And that is a big part of how I see Metroid now. Let's get into more detail. So for this evening, this stormy late evening, when I speak to you by the Metroidvania campfire, I have sort of a three-part pitch. There's the darkness, it's there, there's the endurance, and then there's the conquering. And, you know, we've all watched videos about these topics with Metroid, but I want to put a little spin of paint on them, because holy crap, the enemies are so cute to me now. To reiterate, when I got into Metroid, I was coming off playing a ton of Nintendo series for the first time. I was a new Zelda fan. I recently became the Kirby fan I am now, only a year previously. Most of my life, I played like fantasy JRPGs, Pokemon, you know, pretty mild fare. And when I first played Metroid, you know, I didn't really get it. I didn't understand. I'm like, it's not making me smile. It's not making me smile. These are creepy, grossy crawlies. What? Like, they're not cute. They're not funny. They're not charming me. I don't get it. But, you know, I think this is an acquired taste is what they call it, because now I go back and it's like, oh my gosh. There's a pretty funny discussion in my stream chat a couple months ago when I went to the sewers in Hollow Knight, which for most people is hell on earth because it is the most, like, overwhelmingly gross place in the whole map. But two of my biggest fans and supporters who like Resident Evil were like, this shit's cute. What do you mean it's cute? Like, this is adorable. Because in the context of Hollow Knight, it's disgusting. They're like, blah, 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 and like nothing else is doing that. But if you think about it, that's a cutening of creepy monsters from like other, you know, creepy monster games, and a bunch of you were like, well, duh. But hey, this is new to me, and I think there's value. I'll just put that out there. I think there's inherently value in hearing people go through different stages of the learning process, because it can help elucidate the learning process and give context to things. That's why I talk like this. That's why we gotta talk about Metroid. Now I go back to Metroid, and I don't know, it's not like I've been playing a bunch of horror games or anything, but oh my god. Metroid enemies are like, they're always crawling, and they got little spikes, and they got little eyes, and they're staring at you. They're like battle hamsters. They're like scorpions, which are also cute to me now. I don't know, man. It's just, they're so little. There's just something to their design that's so charming. They put you on edge. You gotta kill them. They're hostile, but they're friendly too. And I don't know. I think there's also something to the atmosphere itself, where you've got enemies that are not Waddle Dees. They're not even bokoblins. They're not even goofy. They're just pointy and spooky. So, okay, yes, this is the genre. Go further, Layla. The atmosphere. The atmosphere hits really different once you've seen where it goes. Super Metroid, the first time I played it, was mysterious, it was dangerous, it was so exciting, and that was wonderful. I didn't know what was around every corner, I didn't know where we were going, I really was just like, smaller than it. I was like, anything could be hiding in here, this is so scary, I was so in it. More time goes by, I come back and it's like, well, no, the emotional range doesn't go that far. Nobody's gonna be, deep throating a demon tendril. Nobody's gonna be, eaten alive. It's just Metroid. Like, it's dark. It's absolutely dark. But there are safe boundaries. And, I think there's a kind of issue with calling something like babies first, I'm almost saying those words, but that's not what I mean. Calling something babies first, nani, is kind of reductive, I think. In some cases, yeah, some things are simply simpler versions of other things that also exist, and thus they're good at easing somebody into things. But when it comes to this kind of thing, I think Metroid has some of its own value, because, I don't know, there are other scarier sci-fi horror things out there, I trust this, but I think there's a particular value in having something that feels like a little toy box. Like, there's a darkness here, but it's a toy. It's made by Nintendo. It feels good to hold. It's not gonna bite you. It feels very safe. And now that I've got to a point where Metroid feels kind of safe and familiar, I like it even more. I can kind of go with it. Like, it's like a ghost story, but my dad's the one telling it, and I trust him, and I know that he's not gonna bring out anything that's super unsettlingly dark, but it's still fun, You can almost give yourself into it more and get more wrapped up, like, oh no, that's so spooky, if you have the trust and you understand the boundaries. Of course, there's value to being scared. I'm not trying to say that we should all be sheltered and only, wade out to certain depths of spookiness, but I think there is specifically such a value in the atmosphere of Metroid where it takes ideas from more dark, more intense, more disturbing things and simplifies them, because, like, you don't have time to be wrapped up in all the darkness here, because what you really have to be doing is the action, You don't have time to be getting caught up in this. You don't have time to be devastated. It keeps it at a certain emotional level where it's manageable. It's very, very manageable. And that's obviously a huge part of the game, is facing real extant darkness, pointy, not cute, but handling it. The handling is probably the most powerful part. That's where the video game medium shines. So, I'll say right now, I think it's that first part, the first impression, the atmosphere and the darkness, that I have explored the least, and why I maybe sound like a total goofball, reiterating the same conversations people who consume horror media have when they're 11, which is, yeah, it's scary, but it's fiction. I know, but I hope there's some value in hearing it dissected by a overly metacognizant 27-year-old. That's my canon age, by the way. I got a comment asking if I was 17 recently, which I cannot go into. I think that is kind of where I'm most interested in poking and exploring, but I could tell you a couple things about the concepts of enduring and handling in games such as Super Metroid and Metroid Dread from the years I've spent with the series. It's unmatched. I think, there's brand loyalty, we want another Metroid game because we like Samus, but at the same time, the gameplay of these games, it's really often emulated, never matched, and I've played 25 games or so trying. 30, really, I just haven't locked in that 25th or 30th. My fucking god. The thing is, you can't really experience what somebody is experiencing in a movie like Alien if you don't play a video game, if you don't live it. I think there's a hugely under-discussed value in video games, which is simply that there is a value in living and dreaming and practicing and playing and living the experience. Like, I don't know, I've said this before, I'm not gonna quite go down that hole, but there's something deep to that. There's something deeply meaningful there, and Metroid accomplishes that by giving you familiar tools and ways to read your environment. And as I mentioned, the environment's scary, so, this is fucking Metroidvania 101, but, to go from being a very small victim of the environment to mastering it, you learn, you practice, and you constantly repeat the things that you know. It's also really fun to do these things, so after a while, you build up a rhythm like doing any activity, And before you know it, you're picking apart the environment, using things to grow, finding and restoring parts of yourself. This is kind of, the general discussion that we have with these kinds of things, but you can't ignore how important it is to go through the process of growing through something. And, why is this different from Link getting his crossbow and his hook shot and his skater shoes and everything for the third time in the same Hyrule map? It's because it's spooky and because you're alone. The alone element, in a way, doesn't belong to any layer of the pie as I'm cutting it here, but it belongs to all of them. Why are the bugs so spooky? Well, it's because you're alone. You're the only human. Usually. Usually you're the only human, in my experience. And then, why is it so satisfying to learn how to handle cracked rock, or learn how to do a ball jump with a spring boost? Because you're alone, and because this is how you engage with the environment that you are unfamiliar with. Nobody's teaching you, and you learned it on your own. That's crazy cool. That's endurance right there. But then, once you've mastered that, moving on to level 3, what is the game really building to? Because even though she gets reset every single time, Metroid games are always about conquering. They're always about becoming really, really big, and yet people who simply want to be powerful are villains. So what makes Samus different? What makes us different? I don't know. Why is it that getting all of our power-ups and killing everything and blowing up the planet is based when it's us, but bad if it's somebody else? To backtrack a little bit, if the point of the game is to master the environment, and maybe even replay it over and over and over again, and just beat it until it's just a toy box, really, a flavorful little toy box that you're not afraid of at all, where's the value? What about being scared? What about being small? And, is the message of this game just getting strong feels really good? No, I think in order to get to the final layer, I think you have to look at the journey itself and what it created. So I really can't pretend to have a really cohesive reading on the overall messages of Metroid, because I haven't played a lot of the games that have the most dialogue. They got other characters in some of these games. That's crazy to me. But just the general Metroidiness. This isn't a series review. This is, what is the deeper meaning of playing one of these games? Of going from being small and powerless in a pretty scary environment, mastering it in a very fun and satisfying way, and then ultimately triumphing, and then triumphing again in the other games, and the other games, and the other games, without becoming evil, right? Without becoming cold. It creates a story, and that's a very multifaceted thing. So, on one hand, you have your story of having gone through the game. Most people have a lot of really powerful memories, especially their first couple games, because you're alone. So if it's like Breath of the Wild. If you thought of the idea, then you're going to remember it. But, it's a little bit more guided, so you're pretty consistently going to have some breakthrough moments. If you don't think about using the super bomb on the glass tunnel in Super Metroid, well, actually, you could look up a guide, but odds are you found something else that blew your mind and made you feel so smart once you mastered it. So, there's a story of, I can conquer these things, and it's pretty fun. Then, there's kind of the in-universe duality of, Samus is getting very, very powerful over the course of these games. After every game, she overcomes something else from nothing. It's not even she's getting a mass of weapons to use. No, she usually loses everything, gets it back, and then wins. She's not just powerful in terms of brawn, she's powerful in terms of spirit. And I think it's, the more you contrast her with villains, these villains aren't very complicated, but Samus starts off in Metroid 1 just doing a job. Then in Metroid 2, she goes pretty far, and for her job, has to wipe out every Metroid, but she makes a choice. She is able to give mercy. She's not without conscience, and then in Super Metroid, that is paid back. she chooses not to kill mindlessly. She spares something, and then that thing comes to care about her. And now there's actual affection built into the story, and she's more than just a, human soldier. So she's pretty cool. She's enduring, and she's also capable of giving mercy and care to another Metroid. So I think when you get to a game like Metroid Dread, I don't know the themes of Metroid Fusion. Once you arrive at Dread, it's about her becoming uber powerful. But it's not just that. It's not just about her being uber powerful. It's not just about having the good genes. She became powerful, and she is a very cool person, and she's kind of a legend. If I were to imagine where the series is gonna go now, it sounds so stupid. It sounds so stupid. But whatever is going on with Psylux, that's a different part in the timeline, but the idea of other people either wanting to take her down, not just use her power like Ravenbeak did, but the idea of other people who you could view as equals, not like government leaders or world government leaders like Ravenbeak, just other bounty hunters, other powerful people like her, people who through their visual design look similar to her, like Psylux. Like that's kind of the most striking thing as a non-Prime fan is Psylux looks like her. When you take off that helmet, it could be another human woman in there. I don't fucking know. It sounds so cliche, but if you had somebody be inspired by her, have it be like Syndrome or something. Have like some character that wants to be like her and went off the deep end. I think the dual face to her power is the story that it creates, because again, she's not just like Ridley who has a bunch of goons and intellect. Her strength is her enduring spirit, and that spirit, paired with being super fucking powerful, is a legend. And I think this is the most pretentious, least informed use of these two overly cited, edgy media properties in the sci-fi world, but you could bring in the Ghost in the Shell thing. I'm not that well read on Ghost in the Shell, but it does present this interesting concept of if you're no longer reproducing biologically, you can reproduce by carrying... Oh god. I have to explain Ghost in the Shell. You can carry on in other ways. Echoes of you and the life that you've lived can pass on through others. People can be inspired by you. People can take motivation from you. It's stories. We can live on through stories. It's so basic, but then you see cyborgs do it, and they don't have the ability to reproduce, and then you're transgender and you don't have the ability to reproduce. It means a little bit more. I think the point of all this is, if Metroid cares at all about reproduction, I don't think it cares about it in the gonads way. I think it cares about it in... Samus is really cool, but eventually... she needs to become a legend. She needs to become a story. I don't think she has to go away, but this is 5 games of her becoming a god, and now she's basically a god. And we already had, a world government leader crazy guy trying to use her for power. I think the best way to treat this story, and trust me, I'm still talking about this on a game level, is the inspiration. So let's take it back to the game level. You start in a spooky place. You're alone, and you need to endure. So you do endure, and alone, you do very, very fun things to conquer and learn. And then you become powerful, and you win, and you want to do it again. And there's a story. There's a story of you, the player, with Samus, the robot armor woman, biologically linked woman to her armor. I don't understand the armor connection as of Fusion. I really don't. There's a story. And I have a surprise for you. The video doesn't just have these 3 layers. There's 3 layers on top of that. Spiral out. Keep going, motherfucker. The real point that I'm getting at here is Metroid is a very wonderful toy box that makes a very cool layered experience for the player, whether it's your first time playing or a replay when certain things hit a little deeper than you're expecting to for the fact that you've done them 7 times. There's a story, and the story says, I can do fun things even when I'm scared and to conquer and be okay. And if you've played enough Metroid, I would be shocked if that story didn't help you in real life. So, now that we've talked about Metroid, we need to talk about Metroid. It is July 2023. Like some logistically impossible scene from the end of a movie meant to symbolize everything a character has that will always be there for them. Almost every member of my mom's side of the family, cousins, aunts, uncles, significant others of cousins, aunts, and uncles, everybody is together at the pool, one of the pools that I grew up going to have a big gathering. Even though I have COVID. Even though I have COVID, people are fucking nervous about COVID. I'm nervous about COVID. I've gotten it twice. They all came together to see me. Okay, maybe one person stayed home because I had COVID. It's based. I got to say goodbye to all these people. I got to catch up with them for the first time in a while. We got to hang. I got to tell them crazy stories about my crazy life. And then I got in the car and I turned it on. And there was no action I could take next besides listening to music from Metroid, because they were saying goodbye to me before I moved to Asia. Before I moved to Asia for not a little while, not a study abroad, but a year, and not just a year. None of us had time to emotionally prepare ourselves for the fact that it's very easy to extend your contract in this position. And if I enjoy Asia, I could just stay in Asia. I've been in Asia with one break to go home for like 600 days or something. I have played Metroid countless times, but not on a Nintendo console and not emulated. I was playing Metroid in real life. Have you played Metroid in real life? Let's move on to layer 2 here. I really wasn't even that into Metroid at the moment. I played a lot of the games that I love, like maybe a year before, but by that time, July 2023, I just wasn't on a big Metroid high or anything. And I hadn't even gotten that deep with the series on a couple of these levels I'm talking to. Because it was new. Only 2 years since I got into it. But when I closed the door to my car, and I couldn't hear my family anymore, and I didn't even know if I would be the same person the next time I saw them. I mean, if you leave one world, don't expect to come back to the same one. Is that Kingdom Hearts? That might be Spider-Verse. Spider-Verse kicked my ass. Spider-Verse also kicked my ass. That came out that month. I really had such an indescribable feeling when it hit, right? The car's a metaphor. The car's a metaphor, you guys. I was driving alone. I wasn't being driven home to go and continue hanging out. Like, this was it. This was my family. This was everything I had. These were all these people who were with me through thick and thin, and I thicked them and thinned them out by coming out as trans and being awkward and shit. Like, they're still with me in a lot of different ways. And I did it. Me, this idiot. I got in the car. I closed the door. I turned the key. Same way I go to college, you know? And in some ways, you guys, in some ways, going to college was almost scarier. And my dad said that, you know. Broden has never been to Asia. Had never been to Asia. He likes Asia now. He was like, you know what? In some ways, I feel like going to college might be even scarier than moving to another country. It was just his intuition talking out of his ass. Now you know where I get it from. And I get that. Because I was fucking afraid to move to college the first time I did. Because I'm not good at this shit. I'm not very independent. I'm learning. I'm learning. It doesn't come easy. Some people can just walk out the door and make a home for themselves. But belonging? Figuring shit out on your own? Nope. I'm weird. I was privileged enough to not have to learn a lot of survival skills till kinda late. Doesn't come easy. Why am I talking about myself so much? Because I just shifted from moving to Asia, as somebody with a master's degree, getting a master's degree was also Metroid. Back to talking about being an undergrad, because that feeling, whether it's in a video game or going to the army and killing people, there's a reason I said that example, or playing Metroid and really getting into it, it's all the same feeling. Having to rely on yourself, having to exclusively rely on yourself and your skills, and getting through that kind of thing. Something that's totally out of your league, something where you really do feel alone, whether you are actually alone or you just feel that way. Be careful, because you can play Metroid even when you're with other people. There's co-op Metroid, and it's called isolating yourself. There are so many degrees to which you can make yourself feel like you're alone by being like, oh, nobody else understands this, nobody else is going through this. And there's layers of truth to that, but it is such a human experience to feel like you're alone and have to grow through the experience. But you do it enough times. You might see where I'm going. You do it enough times and the story develops. You do it enough times and you start to realize how big you are. And each time, even if you're going to lose all of your equipment, the next time something scary happens, the next time you do something crazy out of your league, it's that spirit shit. It's that spirit shit that makes Samus cool. She's not like the most loving character. She's not the most, like, I don't know, benevolent. We say justice, but she's basically like a space cop. No, the reason we like her is the spirit. There's something cool about enduring. There's something specific to her story, and I'm not even going to try to put one pin into it, but the spirit of Metroid, the spirit of going through this and eventually realizing that it's life and it can be fun even if it hurts, even if it's scary. It's a story and it repeats. It can be traumatizing, it can be awful, it can be how you heal from trauma, but that process of learning to trust yourself to go through it. Start with nothing. Find your upgrades. Upgrade your suit. It's all a metaphor for whatever you have to do. And sometimes it's not very metaphorical. I'll go back to the living abroad thing, because I started with nothing. Then I figured out how my cell phone plan works. Then I figured out how to use my local resources, even if I wasn't ready to emotionally open up to them. Then I learned customs and how to be a good employee. Now, being a Japanese school employee is not so scary, but the world that I was inhabiting and exploring was a lot smaller before I knew how to not freak out existentially at my job, because what the fuck am I doing? That's life, guys. Like, it's just how it is. Learning and trusting the process, it's not just for big green adventures, you know? Adventuring is one thing, having funny things happen one after another, and, you know, braving some scary shit, going from one to another, that's one vibe. The other vibe is, oh man, this is so scary and I'm so alone. And when things don't feel like a big fun adventure, it's really good to have a story to lean on, isn't it? Oh, isn't it? Level 3, Layer 3, 3. I'm doing a finger gesture. We need to talk about Metroid more. We need to talk about the human experience of having things that you can't fully share with anybody. Things that you did. Your experience solving puzzles. Metaphorically, real life, Metroid, all of it. We're full of things that only we know. That's inherent to them. If you're alone and you do it, nobody knows. But there is something in sharing that is so important. Today, I had 2 experiences where fast forward, I've been playing a lot of Metroid. Here's a story. I have met people, even out here in the country where I live, where there's not a lot of diversity. There's not a lot of people who leave the prefecture, but I am lucky enough to work with a woman who is sort of the opposite of me, in a certain sense, where she traveled out of Japan. She lived in England and experienced English culture and indulged in her passion for everything going on in England, became fluent, made friends, went through adversity, getting asked what her favorite anime is by weeaboos in France, by the way. She doesn't like anime, she's just Japanese. She already lived all of this, and yet, you know, there are so many things about her story I'll never know. I'm not Japanese. I'm the problem. And yet, talking together, even though, like, you know, we're not super oopy-goopy, you know, we're not super ushy-gushy, braiding each other's hair and all that, just having the knowledge that we both have been foreigners, and, to be clear, a certain kind of foreigner. We both had the foreigner experience of choosing to go to another country, and choosing to grow through the experience, and choosing to do all of these things. I'm usually, when I put emphasis on these points, it's to make them sound heavier, but I'm actually making this sound lighter, because we can't relate to people who move due to not their choice, like in diaspora, or numerous other reasons why you would be learning language as a second language for survival, not a foreign language for your own fulfillment. And there's a lot of nuance there, but I hope you see the point. It's a specific experience. It's a tough experience, but we are united not just by having done something difficult that nobody else can understand because it is ultimately a personal journey, but a very similar one. And then I talked to my friend who's my age, who theoretically could be listening to this. Hey, Ryuto. I don't think you are. It's a lot of English I just said. But, he was talking about his study abroad, his abroad experience working down in New Zealand, and he just chose to stay for a bit longer when I thought he was going to come home and we could hang out really soon. And I had such a profound feeling, I told him, where I was like, you know, oh, it's so sad, like, when you leave and you go away, because it's great to have somebody out here who gets me, you know? We have so much in common, so many memories from our 27 years of being anime fans who are kind of sensitive and weird, who, you know, are just struggling to make our way in the world and don't have the whole career thing down. Like, those are things we didn't go through together. Again, I grew up in America, he grew up on the west coast of Japan, but, you know, all those unshared memories, all those things we went through together, sometimes very tough, sometimes fun, having those in common is so powerful. And, you know, having gotten closer even while he's in and out of Japan, knowing he was going to be away, I was like, shit, dude, like, I know that my friend is doing in New Zealand what I'm doing here. And we're not together. It'd be nice if we were hanging out together. But we have the same unspoken darkness. We're going through the same shit. We're both struggling at the grocery store. We're both studying so hard to pass language tests that do not guarantee us jobs. We are living such similar lives silently, and we're having fun with it. And the story keeps me warm. And that's super fucking specific. You don't have to go to another country to experience this. I want to make that so fucking clear. You do not have to do something crazy to experience this. Because nothing I've been describing has been more difficult than growing up. There are so many fucking isolating, impossibly hard things about growing up that I didn't fucking understand till I was in my pushing 30. I finally said it. Till I was pushing 30. There's so many things in our lives that all you can do is play Metroid through until one day you meet somebody who has the same darkness. And again, you can't go back. You can't pretend that you were together during those times, but it puts us together. And isn't that beautiful? It's a feeling. I recommend seeking it out. And I'm not being cutesy here. I'm not just like cramming a journal entry into a YouTube channel here. I literally mean it's fun to talk about Metroid, the game. It's so fun to talk about anything you do on your own where you individually create the experience and then talk to somebody else. I think they overdosed on it with Breath of the Wild, but having all of those unique stories play out with the physics engine and the isolation and all that stuff and the open-ended gameplay, there's all these stories in everybody's Breath of the Wild game that can never be fully shared with somebody else. But if you talk to somebody who got into it, you know you both kind of had those things happen. And it's kind of like being connected in a different way. And oh my god, there's so much. I really do mean it. I mean, I talked to a guy who was like, you're trying to prove yourself by living on your own in a foreign country. You tried to prove yourself by going to do a master's degree that kicked your ass. I was you, but I went to the army and I killed people. And I still haven't proven myself. So, please, in the way that he told me, it's pretty badass that you survived on your own for these last couple months. I'm telling you, whatever you've been through, however you've played Metroid, whatever you've done that nobody else will know, whatever story you have that you survived, where you showed your spirit and you learned and you had fucking fun, and now you're getting all kinds of momentum for other shit, that's badass. You don't have to go to Asia, don't have to do any of the weird shit I'm talking about. That's a human experience, and share it with people if you can. If you find people like you. If you don't, just know that everyone is carrying a similar spirit in some way. And if you don't have that, let's just talk about Metroid, because that's fun. And it seriously gets deep. I think it's incredible to capture something I can talk about like this on a dark and stormy night into a tiny game that doesn't even have alien orifice squirting. Like, it's not that complicated. It's a kid's game, and yet it really nails something that I'm always walking circles around, but never able to quite pinpoint talking about other Metroidvanias, because Metroid does it really well.